and welcome back to another Perspectives. And I'm returning to a topic or theme that I've touched upon before briefly, and that is the potential effects of our dear sun. And the reason I touch upon this is because in the last few weeks there's been multiple occurrences of earthquakes and tornadoes in various parts of the world, and there are some commentators who are making correspondences between the increase in earthquakes and tornadoes and other erratic geophysical events and certain behaviour of the sun and certain sun activity and sun flares, and we know that this is an ongoing conversation. So on hearing this, I just got reminded that there was an interesting hypothesis on the sun's activity which was put forward by the mystic philosopher Gurdjieff. And Gurdjieff, as always, would veil his ideas in quite obscure language, and if anyone's ever attempted to read or look into his major book Beelzebub's Tales to His Grandson, they will realize what I'm referring to. So what I did, firstly, I was reminded that I did make a kind of slight reference to this also in a previous book of mine called Healing the Wounded Mind, subtitled The Psychosis of the Modern World and the Search for the Self, in that sometimes psychoses or mental activity can be affected by solar and cosmic activity. So I went and found out the paragraph that I mentioned, and because I haven't looked in my own book for quite a while. This book was, I think, published about November 2019. Yeah, 2019. So in chapter 10, The Gnostic Vision, I actually say, sometimes, however, we are subject to more than just social forces. There are times when life across the whole planet seems irritable and on edge. We must realize that none of us, the animal and vegetable kingdom included, live in a vacuum. Sometimes the wrong wind blows, so to speak. Take the Levante, which is an easterly wind that blows in the western Mediterranean Sea and through the Strait of Gibraltar. For the past several years I have lived in Andalusia, and the Levante, as the Spanish call it, blows often a dry, hot wind that soon begins to make the locals irritable. There's just something in the energy of the wind. The same thing can be said for winds across the planet. Perhaps the same can be said for solar winds. After all, these are already known to cause electromagnetic disruption. What I am saying is that there are also natural external impacts that make us feel restless and put us in a state of tension. Many ancient traditions knew about this. As philosopher J.G. Bennett writes, and here I quote from Bennett, "In a more subtle and pervasive manner, great regions of the earth's surface, and sometimes even the whole of the earth, become subject to a state of tension that produces in people a strong sense of dissatisfaction with their conditions of life. They become irritable or aggressive, apprehensive, nervous, and highly suggestible." And that's from Bennett's book, Is There Life on Earth? So, since that subject has come under my radar again, I thought I would look up Gurdjieff's hypothesis on the about the sun's activity, and it comes under a very strange name, not surprisingly for Gurdjieff, called Solioonensius, Solioonensius, Solioonensius. and I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And what he actually says is that it's a kind of cosmic law, and what happens is that sometimes there's another sun, and I'm reading here the kind of synopsis because I don't have it by memory. There's another sun in a neighboring solar system, and sometimes in cosmic time scale, the sun in the neighboring solar system comes closer to our solar system, the cosmic movements here. And when it does so, as it comes closer, it increases the electric tension. Gurdjieff was using vocabulary of his time. Electric tension, or electromagnetic tension, we may say, of our solar system. And as a consequence, the whole of humanity suffers a heightened psychosis and extreme nervousness. At these times, it then affects the electrobiological human nervous system, and it's most likely going to trigger events across the planet through humanity, such as bloodshed, wars, revolutions, revolt, and earth disasters also. So that's basically what he's saying. Solioonensius is a cosmic law that refers to when our solar system gets heightened energy because a sun in a neighboring system becomes closer to us, and that affects our sun, which gives off electric tension, or we may see it as electromagnetic waves, that then affects our electrobiological system and our mind, because we are an electromagnetic body, affects our mental and our emotional states, and it creates great nervousness, great heightened psychosis, and the consequence is that humans are more likely to engage in what Gurdjieff called reciprocal destruction, i.e. warfare and revolutions. Okay, and so, interesting. And there are some commentators on the solar activity that talk about this. When there are heightened sun activity, there are effects on the earth and in humanity. And there's several sites that discuss this. One in particular that I mentioned before, Suspicious Observers. And just in fact, today they released a daily video, and this one talks about the solar activity on our brains, and they refer to a paper called it's a paper which is Advances in Space Research. It's published in the journal Advances in Space Research, and the title is Effects of Geomagnetic Activity, Variations on the Physiological and Psychological State of Functionality Healthy Humans. And in there, if I can find it, they talk about that geomagnetic storms, which they talk about solar events and geomagnetic storms of the solar cycle. So geomagnetic solar storms, in some way, depending on how strong they are, can have effect on the brain's bioelectrical activity. And they can stimulate influence. Severe, and I'm now reading verbatim, I quote, "Severe disturbances of geomagnetic conditions cause negative influence, seriously disintegrate brain's functionality, activate braking processes, and amplify the negative emotional background of an individual." So that seems to correlate with what Gurdjieff was saying about the solar activity affecting the bioelectrical circuit of the human being and creating, here it says, it seriously disintegrates the brain's functionalities and amplifies the negative emotional background of an individual, i.e. makes them nervous, anxious, and aggressive. So I looked it up a bit more, the Solioonensius from Gurdjieff, and again I came around to find Bennett, John Bennett, who was a student of Gurdjieff. And he goes on to talk about it as well. So I quote here, and this is the extract from Bennett called "This Time We Are In." And if you put that online, I'm sure that you would find the same page I'm reading from, Solioonensius by John G. Bennett. This time we are in. We must not have any attitude of blame towards people for what is occurring. This is a cosmic event. This is what Gurdjieff called Solioonensius in Beelzebub's Tales to his grandson, a state of tension when people, all people, become intensely dissatisfied with the situation in which they find themselves, and they react to this state of dissatisfaction differently. Here is what is the right and the wrong of it. Those who are wise and understand this know that this force of dissatisfaction that is developed can be converted into a dissatisfaction of oneself and a wish to change and to work on oneself. And it is the greatest and most powerful force that one can have. It is the realization that only those who have attained to an inner freedom through work can pass safely through this kind of crisis. I think that's significant. As was amply proven during the great revolutions like the Russian Revolution and elsewhere, this is a path of wisdom in front of us. Other people project the causes outside of themselves, and then you have this sort of tension between races, between generations, between classes, between people who want to change things one way and people who want to preserve things in another way, i.e. revolutions, warfare, etc. This does inevitably occur periodically in the life of man, humankind, and it is a part of the general condition of the existence of life on the earth. It is because of this that we have to work, especially nowadays at this time, and one part of our work is, as far as possible, removing from ourselves, even in our thoughts, criticism and hostility to people whose behaviour we may disapprove of. Constantly look upon these people as helpless, not as hostile, as machines, not as evil people. Even the most dreadful things are not really done intentionally. They are often done through the mistake of the hope for good, or because they are helpless. This helplessness of mankind is something that humans cannot bear to face up to. It is much easier or much more satisfying to our vanity as human beings to think that things go wrong because of bad will, but things go wrong because man is helpless. But there is nothing really to fear or to be ashamed in this, because this is what we have to work ourselves out of. Perhaps there is greater urgency just now because perhaps the period of maximum tension is now approaching, and it will be very, very alarming for quite some time to come. After a few months, not before, and then he goes on, I will give you some exercises. That was Bennett. And that would have been taken from perhaps the early 70s, because Bennett passed away in 74. But what I find significant there, and Gurdjieff talked about it in his Solioonensius idea, is that there are these periodic events that occur across Earth, but also other planets, because of course this cosmic movement affect all the planets. And he said that some sentient species on some planets look forward to this time, because it's a time when they can make use of these tensions of energy for greater acceleration in their evolution, because they are aware of the energies coming and they know how to work and utilize those energies. But unfortunately for humanity on this planet Earth, we are unaware of these cosmic cycles and these events. And also, we seem to be quite irritable when we receive any kind of impacts from the solar system and solar energies. And this unconscious behavior actually then results in a great restlessness, aggression, frustration, and reciprocal destruction, i.e. warfare and revolution. So I find those 2 points significant, and Bennett put it very well. I think is that there is no right or wrong of this. It's just a cosmic law. Okay, there's nothing right or wrong about it. It happens, and periodically it's going to affect this planet. Those who are wise and understand this know that this force of dissatisfaction that is developed can be converted into a dissatisfaction with oneself and a wish to change and to work on oneself. And it's the greatest and most powerful force that one can have. It is the realization that only those who have attained to an inner freedom through work can pass safely through this kind of crisis. So I think what he's saying, that those who have attained freedom, meaning some kind of break away from our programming, our conditioning, the automation of the human being. Because if we are deep within the programming, deep within the conditioning, deep within the automation, then these forces are going to be reacted to automatically. That means we won't think about it, we'll just react in anger, frustration, anxiety, and aggression. But if we are aware of these forces and we can realize that this state of dissatisfaction is an energy which can actually push this dissatisfaction to urge us to work on ourselves further, and actually we can, and that's a good phrase, we can pass safely through this kind of crisis. So what if, hypothesis, what if this period that we are witnessing and going through right now on this planet, with the disruptions and the dissonance and the warfare and the aggression and the frustration and the anxiety, is part of these cosmic cycles, that there's greater tension, electro-energetic magnetic tension on the earth. But if we can realize that, and realize that this state of crisis and dissatisfaction actually is also one of the greatest energies that can push us and steer us into an acceleration of our development. And I think that's something we should consider at this time, because it could be our greatest missed opportunity if we don't utilize these energies in the most correct manner possible. Something to think about. Thanks for bearing with me. Stay grounded, stay sane, and I'll catch you next time. Cheers.